Alright, so my name is Carl Scott Sr. My background is law enforcement, both local and federal. I served initially as a police officer for 10 years, and then I went on and became a federal agent. And I did the special agent role for many years after that, up until I retired. I retired and stayed retired for close to basically 2 years. In the middle of that, I started my own security company, and I also ran for public office. I then came back into the law enforcement field, and now I serve as the chief of police. So that gives me a total now professionally for 26 years in the law field. And I also again serve as an elected official. This is my third year in a 4-year elected term. And I also serve in the capacity in the ministry as an ordained minister. And as if that wasn't enough, I also serve our youth as a coaching currently, and it's a basketball coach in AAU, as well as the local community center teams. And then I also coached as a football coach and ran the president of the organization of that as well. Father of two sons, and this is what I do. Basically, my entire background is service.
Can you share what specific role you serve politically?
Sure, I serve as an elected official on the school board, so I contribute my talents on that side to serve the youth in our communities as a school board member, which helps govern the activities and discipline and hiring and firing, etc. for the school board that I serve.
All right, the second question is, how important is collaboration and building relationships?
In my field, collaboration and building relationships is very important, because everything that I do, again, is centered around service. And if I don't collaborate with different entities, there's no way that I'll be able to be as successful in the things that I have done. For instance, collaboration is important in law enforcement because there are many of entities involved. I serve as the chief of police, but the police department is broken down into several different components, from patrol division, detectives division, command staff. So I have to know how to collaborate with each and every component to make it flow. It's as if you take a body. You take a body, and every body has a component. The arms, the legs, the torso, and everything has its own function. But the body can't properly function without each part being functionable and healthy enough to move. So that's what keeps the body moving. So you got to collaborate with every angle that's possible so that you can be successful in any field that you're working in.
How do you establish relationships with other organizations and other leadership professionals?
I establish relationships with them by going out, meeting whomever they are, he or she may be, introducing myself and giving them a feeling of who I am, explaining my background, explaining the purpose of why I'm meeting them, and what it is that I'm seeking to achieve. If we're not seeking to achieve nothing but just a working relationship, then that's good enough. But you start out that way, and then I offer services in any capacity. However, I may be able to serve that person or serve that entity to help make themselves better, or make their entity better, or their organization better, then I'm doing my job. So that's the main goal and purpose in that, is to going out, presenting yourself who you are. People tend to meet your representative, and then the true them comes out afterwards. But I present the true me up front. So therefore, you're not meeting a representative, nothing changes, and I'm going to stay consistent in my actions and my words from that point on.
What services do other organizations provide to the entities that you work with? So, and not just thinking about police, but in education, in sports, and anything having to do with human services. What other services do other organizations provide to you?
other services that I'll get support services. So if I start on like the law enforcement, I'll get support services from various entities that can help with grants, that can help with funding, that can help with equipment. I get other support services from places that I can refer clients to, if I may, or victims of abuse and things of that nature. Services also that will help with people that have substance abuse problems and the unfortunate rise in suicide and mental health now in today's time. So it's key to have relationships with organizations and people of key components that have training and education in those fields, so that I can be able to refer them out and say, hey, listen, this person needs this assistance, and you're the right person for it. So it's very important to have that. So I have different resources available in all those capacities. Even in coaching, I can go up and I can speak with other coaches, and we can help critique each other on the coach's level and say, listen, this is what I would have done different, or this is how I would approach that, but this is a way to deal with this kid, because that other coach may have coached that kid before, and now I have that kid. So now I know I have an advantage to say, man, okay, thank you for showing me how it was that you were successful, or what it is that you did to bring out a certain talent in that child. Now I know how to maximize the potential and the talent that's in each individual like that.
Does your service in as a coach influence how you approach education and your role in politics as an educator or as a part of the board?
It helped me to realize that each child, each person has their own identity. It forces me to view things and people differently. It forces me to see people in the space that they're in. And it helps me to begin to look at things not through my lens, but through their lens. See how they're processing some things and what it is that they need. I can then take that and I'm able to intertwine all those things and treat each person as an individual. And I can individualize and kind of quote unquote cater to their needs to be able to pull out the full potential in what they have in them.
It's how do you manage diversity?
I manage diversity by, it ties into what my last answer was, where I see people for who they are, not necessarily from where they come from, not necessarily for what it is that they have to offer, but as an individual first. And then I can determine who they are and then find out about their background, which helps to culminate in a totality their person. So I'm very open. I've been blessed to travel around the world and been exposed to many different cultures, many different diversities. In my career, I've worked around various other races, cultures, things of that nature. So it exposed me to be open to everyone and treat everybody as an individual and not circumstantial based off of their ethnicity or the color of their skin.
In your job in all facets, do you all have diversity policies that you all have had to implement?
Yes, we have diversity policies in every capacity in which I've served, from federal law enforcement, local law enforcement, elected official capacity, coaches capacity. Everything had a policy or somewhat on diversity.
Okay, were you included in creating some of those policies?
No, those policies actually were already in place when it came to diversity.
Have you been faced with having to enforce them?
One time I had a role in enforcing diversity issues, and unfortunately it was on the federal side, in which we were treated more not inclusive. We were more excluded and more segregated out when it came to equal opportunity and using our skills and education to be promoted to another level. So I use that as leverage, and I challenge the system, not necessarily for my gain, but for others that were behind me that would be able to gain from what it is that I went through.
And are you, when you say we, what demographic of we are you referring to?
Well, directly, the Black and brown people, African American community. Unfortunately, we tend to be in what even in this year of 2024, we're still considered quote unquote minority, which is one of the biggest, in my opinion, hidden racism. How in the world can you be considered a minority, meaning that you are less than the other person? But even if we look at numbers, we're not the quote-unquote minority when Black and brown people actually dominate the population in the United States of America.
So how would you describe your style of leadership?
My style of leadership is more transformational in that I believe that I have to lead by example. And once I lead by example, and those that, in a professional field, you have your leaders and you have others that are considered subordinates. I don't use that word subordinate because, in my opinion, and in the way that I see things through my lens, a subordinate is somebody that's beneath you. But as a proper leader, I got to see everybody as my equal. No matter if they're my equal or not, quote unquote, I have to see them as that, because that means that shows I look at them and I can find the leadership capabilities and qualities in them, and that forces me to find a way to pull those things out. So I don't have a problem with, as I describe in my field, getting in the trenches and going in the trenches, even as their leader, to show that I'm not above doing this. I'm not above serving this. I'm not above going out and doing what people may be considering, the leg work or the grimy work or something like that. So I believe that when those people that working with you, quote unquote subordinates, see that you are willing to quote unquote lower yourself to their level, and I don't view us as different levels again, but when they see that you don't mind being out of your role and stepping into their role, then that helps to transform everything, and that helps to raise the morale, and that helps people to realize that you are actually leading by example. I believe that any great leader must be a great servant first in order to transform into being a leader. But even after you transform into being a leader, you still have to serve while leading. And that's why I believe that transformational is so key, because you're going to continue to serve, and I feel like I'm going to outserve those that serve me.
So do you think that leadership is something that is natural, or is something that can be taught?
Okay, I feel that it's something that is natural. Leaders are born. Managers are made. You can train somebody to manage people, but a leader is something that's born. A leader is something that's innate, that is just there. And you can tell leaders, because no matter where you are, you'll see that one person that stands out, that one person that's ahead of the pack. That's the leader. If you watch a person's life, you'll see in stages of life, they've always led in some capacity. With me, and I'll use mine as an example. Throughout my life, everything that I've been involved, I somehow managed to be the leader, quote unquote, of it. In my youth, I was let's go back to grammar school, I was the mayor of my school.
Wow.
I was in church, and I was the young adult choir president. When I was on the usher board, I was the it was called junior usher. I was the president of that. When I moved on and went on through schooling, I was the captain of my teams that I played with. Moving forth in that, when I became an adult, everything that I participated in with that, I was the leader. I was part of our homeowners association, and I was the president of that. When I became an elected official, I immediately got elected and appointed as the vice president and moving forward. And in my field, I eventually was leading in every department that I was in. In patrol, I was the officer in charge. When I moved on and became a federal agent, I was the team lead. And now, of course, coming back into the local police department, I'm now serving. I came back as the deputy chief, and I served as the deputy chief for about 8 months or so. And then they made the move and put me in and made me the chief. So leaders, again, are natural, it's innate. No matter what you put your hands into, it's going to succeed, and you're going to find yourself on top of that just because of where you was born and how you were created. The Bible, if I have to do this, the Bible says that before I formed you, I knew you, and I called you to be. That calling to be is something that's important. You were called to be a leader, so you have no choice but to walk into that.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for sharing your journey. Do you think that as a part of this, and have you experienced any type of leadership training?
Yeah, so even though you are born as a leader, it still has to be developed, if that makes sense. So training is very key. I'm huge on training. I think that anything that you are successful in, anything that you rise to the top at, some form of training is going to come with it. So, for instance, when I got my master's degree, I went through a formal training, quote unquote, for that in order to go forth. In law enforcement, you go through a training. I achieved something that's considered on a federal level when I was an active federal agent, a distinguished expert shooter. While the leadership and that skill was innate, I was born with it. Training helped further develop it and catapult me to a level of achieving that position and that title and that level of quote unquote expertise. So training is very key to moving forth and rising to the top. It's kind of separating the oil from the water.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so can you describe some of the challenges that you have experienced in leadership?
Yes. One of the biggest challenges that I have faced in leadership was change and accountability. Two words that a lot of people don't want to happen and don't want to be part of. So coming into something, people tend to feel that they have to make their mark, they have to put their stamp on everything. I'm a fan of that. If it's not broke, I'm not going to try to fix it. I'll just find a way to keep it moving and keep it moving a little more smooth, a little more with a little more fluidity towards forward progression. So, but when you see some things that has to happen, that's when you have to go forth. So one of the main challenges with that, especially coming in new to an organization, they're used to things happening one way. So when you begin to implement a change or you begin to hold people accountable for their actions, the biggest thing that you're going to face is a change and a lower in morale. The morale level will drop because now it's a challenge to say, okay, who does he think he is? Who does she think she is? I don't have to do this. I don't respect that. And then you're going to be faced with people challenging, having issues with challenging and accepting and facing authority. Any leader is in an authoritative position, and you're gonna be given some pushback. There's a quote on my wall in my office, and I'm trying to remember the words exactly, but if I can kind of paraphrase it, it's somewhere on the lines that if you accept the role and responsibility of being a leader, then you must expect to be criticized. You must expect to be talked about. You must expect to be put down. You must expect to be looked in a lower light and your light to appear to be dim to others, but that's when actually your light tends to shine a little more, because they're trying to cast an overcast over what it is that you're trying to do. So those are one of the major things that I have faced, that any leader will face on with that, is challenges, especially if you're dealing with people of a different nationality, if you're dealing with people in different age groups. You know, you may be younger, and some may feel like, okay, I'm older than you, so I what qualifies you versus me? You know, so you're dealing with that. You're dealing with some anger, some strife, some jealousy is definitely part of things that you will face as a leader, because people are yearning to be in your position, but not necessarily willing to go through what it is that you went through. You know, the people don't want to accept the cost of what it is that you had to pay. You know, in the religious world, in the gospel world, in the Christianity world, they don't want to pay the cost and know the cost of that anointing, so they don't want to go through it. Everybody in a case like this, everybody may think that it's cute to be called Dr. Such and Such, but do they want to go through the blood, sweat, and tears that it took to earn those initials after your name, before and after your name? So those, in my opinion, is just some of the challenges that you will face in leadership positions.
How does all of the different things that you do work? As a leader, you have been called to be a leader in multiple different ways. You are an active leader in different fields that contrast a little bit. So how does that work for you? Like, how do you do that?
Yep. So I think I find it easy, where people view it as difficult and you wear so many hats. But this is how I find it easy, and it all sums up to one word. Everything that makes up who I am is centered around one word, and that word is service. And if you think about everything that I do in my life that has been pointed out, that has been part of my background, that you know that I do in the multiple roles and the multiple hats that I wear, all of it is based off of service. And because that service is so key and so needed, I believe that my faith principles and background helps that easy and successful will come my way, because I'm a servant, and that's just the key word. So where it is difficult, when I sat and thought about all of the things that I do, and all of the hats that I wear, and all of the titles, quote unquote, that I have, and leadership roles that I play in multiple capacities, it definitely was mind-boggling. I sat one day and tried to figure out, how in the world am I doing all of these things at the same time? But then I sat and got my answer. My answer was, it's because of the grace that's been given to me, because I'm serving the people in every capacity. So that would be my answer right there.
Okay, cool. And I just want to state for the record, I witnessed a moment recently where I believe that your police side, your chief of police side, your law enforcement side was able to influence your education and coaching side, where you brought information and leadership from one area and brought it into a whole different field that's completely unaffiliated.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you able to do that often?
I'm able to do that often because if everything is based about service, it's in my opinion, I found a way to make it easy to just tie things in, because even if what you experience and seen for yourself, when we look at the whole overall thing, it's still tied into service, and it all wrapped around one topic at the same time. So I found a way to utilize my education, utilize my experience, utilize what's been innate in me to bring people to see that light. In all actuality, when we look at our roots and our ancestry and history, especially when it comes to Christian beliefs and power, if you are a great storyteller, you can tend to bring anybody to the point that you want to make. for them to see what it is that you're trying to make, for them to walk the journey that you are taking. It's all about being a great storyteller with some feeling and some emotion behind it. But when people really see that not only are you telling a story, quote unquote, but you're telling a lesson behind it, and you're expressing the emotion from your passion, from your service with it, it all culminates into that one great point. And that's when that light bulb goes off. That's when that aha moment comes, like, wow, I got it. You made it very relatable. So that's how it works for me.
Okay, thank you. And I want to point out one other thing that you told me before, where you shared that your knowledge in law enforcement crossed over to your vice presidency in the school district, where you were able to foresee that they needed metal detectors in the school because of the climate of what was happening. And so your expertise in one field spilled over to another thing that you would not have had if you would not have had that experience and knowledge and leadership in law enforcement.
That's correct. I agree with that.
Okay, so I think the last question I want to ask you is, what advice would you give to leaders in training or future leaders?
Sure. The biggest key of advice that I can give to future leaders in training is to be very open, very transparent to your people, to those that you are going to be leading, because people want to see that. They want to see you lead by that example, but they want to see the transparency in it all. So if there is something that you're seeking to gain from the person or from a group, then be transparent and tell them, this is exactly what I'm seeking to gain from this. This is exactly the end goal behind it, and this is the blueprint that I have. Some people want to be led by the hand. They want to know step by step how to do something. So the worst thing that we could do is to assume that they're gonna know how to do it. Just show them, and those that know how to do it, they're gonna catch on, or they're gonna let you know, hey, you know what? I got it. This is definitely how I see things. And those that don't get it, you're gonna know the difference, because you're gonna see them. They're gonna still have that yearning, that pulling on your training, your experience, your education, your knowledge, your spirit, to say, I need more from you. So I tell them what it is that we're looking for. I bring the expectation, and then I wrap all that in with what it is that they offer. To say, hey, you know what? I know that you're strong in this area, so I'm gonna continue to push you here, and I know that you may be struggling in this area, so let me go ahead and help you in there. So therefore, you finding strengths and weaknesses in all other people, and you're able to allow them to see that themselves. I'll complement those strengths, and then I won't necessarily down the weaknesses. I'll just explain that, you know, you very strong in, let's say somebody's very strong in communicating, but they're not the strongest in their work ethics. So I'm gonna let them know, you know, sir or ma'am, you are a strong communicator. You can get your point across to anybody. Now, they may not be the best at demonstrating it, but I'm gonna tell them, I'm gonna draw for that to say, listen, once you communicate while doing what it is that you want to bring that person to, they're unknowingly realizing and not even realizing what they're doing. They're strong in communication, weak in their doings, but if they're a strong communicator and they're talking themselves through how to properly carry out that task, they're going to carry out that task the way they're communicating it, the way their mind has seen it, the way they've seen it through their lens. And before you know it, now they develop even more stronger strengths in that area in which they were weaker. And that strength, their strong area, is just going to continue to dominate.
Okay, cool. Last question, I promise. How important is ethics in leadership?
Okay, so ethics is extremely important because you got to know the balance. You got to know where to draw the line. You got to know what line to not cross. You got to know what's right, what's wrong, both naturally, legally, spiritually. You got to know. So ethics, you got to have that the ethics and morals, in my opinion, kind of walks hand in hand and ties in with each other. Because if you don't have ethics, you're not going to do anything right. And when you begin to go astray from what it is that you're originally called to do, what you were supposed to do, what you were placed in position to do, you were hired to be a leader in this position, but you're straying away from the ethics and the morals behind it, is when your integrity is questioned. And when you lose your integrity, you lost the people that you lead, you lost yourself, and you lost the confidence in those that put you in that place, in that position in the first place.
Have you seen people in leadership lose those ethics?
Unfortunately, I've seen it a lot. You see it darn near daily, and we've seen it on every level, whether it's been, something small, something big in a major business, a major company. We've seen it in politics. We've seen it on a local level in politics. We've seen it on the state level. Listen, we've seen it in the federal government. And because I talk in full transparency, the same transparency that I've been saying, we've seen it even in the level of the president. And I'm not going to say which president, because we'll be quote unquote politically correct. But let's just say we've seen it in the president in recent times, if that makes sense, where the ethics and the morale and the integrity was just completely thrown out. And I would say this because I spoke on this one time while I was giving a message at a church. I said, when we was talking about how capitalistic the United States is and how we're a capitalistic country. And I said, and basically, whether we want to like it or not, money can buy you anything. And I said, our morals and our ethics and our integrity won't let us sell everything. But money would darn near buy you everything. And I said it, and it was on record, that money bought the president of the United States. It bought the office of the presidency. And it was nothing to be ashamed of, because I offer our work in full transparency. And guess what? The people actually received it. And for those that are actually woke and don't mind speaking truth to power, they agree with it.
Okay, so as a leader who already walks in so many leadership roles and collaborates with other people, we talked about you creating relationships to collaborate. What are some of the affiliations that you have?
So I'm current member of what's called FLEOA, Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association. I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, the Noops, yo to the Noops. I'm a member of the South Suburban Chiefs of Police Association. I'm a member of the Illinois Chiefs of Police Association, and I'm a member of the International Chiefs of Police Association. Is there something else I might be missing that I have to let you know?
Your spiritual affiliation.
So spiritual affiliation, I'm a Christian. I have a Christian background, ordained minister in the church. I spoke on that, and that's what I also have a master's degree in, which is Master's degree of Divinity.
What you spoke on your degrees? What colleges have you? And you can speak on your sports stuff too. Your former sports rankings.
Former sports. I mean, I played high school and college football. I ran track also. Back in my day, I was number 2 in the state of Illinois when I was fully participating and fully active. I got my undergrad from Chicago State University, and I got my master's from McCormick.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else you would like to share or words of inspiration for me?
Words of inspiration, I always say that obedience is greater than sacrifice. So be obedient to what it is that you have been called and assigned to do. Be obedient to the vision that you have. The sacrifices are going to come with it. And we know that the reward is greater because of who you are and what you've been called to do and assigned to do in these times.
Thank you so much for taking the time out to do this interview and provide us with all this inspiration and information. We appreciate it.